Today we're going to be learning Sukkah Daf Mem Tet. We're going to finish we're not going to finish tomorrow. We're going to finish the 4th chapter. So we're near the end of this Masechet. We will start the 5th chapter in the middle of tomorrow's Daf. Today's Daf is sponsored by Amy Cohn on the Yurt side of her father, Rav Dov Chaim Ben Ze'ev Zichrono Livracha, who taught all his 5 daughters Talmud and the love of Torah. Abba, since I started doing Daf Yomi with Rabbanit Michelle, I'm reminded of many of your teachings and feel your presence. And a refuah shlema for Shiur Bat Ilana Shoshana, who's undergoing surgery today, and Gabriel Moshe Ben Tzvia, and also a refuah shlema to Bar El Achia Ben Nitza, the soldier who was wounded. Praying for a recovery, a full recovery. Okay, we are going to start now. We finished with this story of the Stuki. Remember that really interesting story where he poured, not such a great story, but where he poured, right, to make a statement, he poured the water on his legs instead of pouring it down. Because of that, they instituted that they always have to lift up their hands so everybody sees what they're doing. But all I can think about is, when someone has a gun and they always say, put your hands up so that we can see what your hands are doing, right? The same kind of idea here, obviously a little different, although as in Josephus, we said, his account of the story did end in murder and had a very bad ending. Not clear whether that happens in the version that we hear. We don't really hear about that part at all, which is either it was neglected on purpose to show, look, they really only cared about the temple and how things looked, right? Even the Mizbeach, they fixed the altar and it was really just to fix it for looks, for the way it looked, and not even for it didn't even fix the altar. And yet they were doing things all for the look. And maybe it's a show of, things are, their perspective is off. On the other hand, maybe it's also showing the importance so many times in Masechet Yoma, the importance of how things looked in the temple and the things be, right? We're talking here, they would use golden kalim to take golden vessels to carry the water. And there is importance to the looks of the temple and how things appear. So maybe it's a positive spin on the story. Tough to really know. Again, a lot of food for thought. We're now going to start from the 3rd line of today's daf. We're now getting totally off on a tangent. And from here, we're going to get into all sorts of drashot. Okay, mainly today is really drashot. From verses, we're going to start from a verse in Shiur HaShirim, and we're going to learn from here about the shitim. The shitim were these drain pipes. Okay, yesterday, we discussed how it went down. Right, we put the water. I'll even show you some pictures right now. Second. Okay, here's a picture. This is a book called The Beit HaMikdash B'Yerushalayim. I think it's also translated into English. There's all different kinds of books. They all have different kind of pictures. Anyway, this shows the two bowls that were this is a picture of what the bowls possibly look like, right? You never really know exactly what they look like because we didn't live then. But here are the bowls. I want you to notice a few things about them. First of all, they're 2 different sizes, as we saw yesterday, one for the wine, one for the water. Secondly, notice that they're on stands. Okay, this is going to be important for later in the daf to understand. So these are bowls with a hole at the bottom, but it's not that the hole sat directly on the hole that was in the altar. Right? Remember, the altar had these holes. We're standing at the top of the altar near the corner, near the southwest corner. There was 2 holes, and above each hole was this cup with legs. Okay, that's important to understand for later in today's daf so that you can visualize what exactly is happening. But for now, all we need to know is there was a bowl with a hole. Right then from there, it dripped into the hole that was on the altar. From there, it went down into this drain pipe. And then the question is, what happened to it after that? So there's going to be a very interesting debate, and it's going to be based on the concept of who built these drain pipes. Okay, now you would assume, okay, they were built when the temple was built. But that's not what Rabbi Bar Hana is going to say that Rabbi Yochanan says. Shitin mishesha yemei bereshit nivru'u. These drain pipes existed from the time of the creation of the world. Okay, God created them. How do we know this? Okay, it's not exactly how do we know this, but where do we see a reference to this in the Torah? Or not in the Torah, but in the Tanakh? So quote a verse from Shiur HaShirim. Shenema chamukei yirechayich. Okay, the hidden part of your thighs. Kimo chalaim maaseh yedei oman. They were like something crafted by a craftsman. So chamukei yirechayich. What are these? Elu hashitim. These are the drain pipes. Why the drain pipes? Because they're hidden, just like your thighs are hidden beneath your clothing. The drain pipes were hidden under the altar, right? Nobody saw what happened. Once the water went down or the wine went down, nobody saw what happened to it. It was hidden. Kimo chalaim. What is this word? Well, the root of this word is chalaim shemecholalim, that they're hollowed. V'yordin aratahom, right? What is hollowed? It's the drain pipes. They're hollowed and they go all the way down to the depths of the earth, like to the center of the earth, to basically, it goes to who knows where. Okay. It goes really, really far. And that's what we're saying was created from the time of creation. This path, it's almost this interesting concept of this path that leads from the temple all the way to the center or the depths of the earth. My Seidaman, what does it mean? It was a craftsman did this. Right? Who could do this other than God? So this was directly created by God. Here's another drasha that you might not be so familiar with, but after you hear this, you might remember this forever. Tana de Rabbi Yishmael Bereshit, right? When it says Bereshit bara Elohim, right? How do we know that God created this in the beginning of the world? Because the word Bereshit, I'll create Bereshit, don't read it as one word. Ela bara sheet. Read it as two words. He created the sheet, this drain pipe. Okay. The word Bereshit now has a totally different meaning than you've ever thought before. It's all about how God created the drain pipe. Okay. So there you have it. And then, right, if anything, it was the first, almost sounds like it was the first thing created. Okay. That's one approach. And now we're going to see. So first we saw Rabbi Yochanan said it. He's an Amora. Then we brought a Tannaitic source from the house of Rabbi Yishmael that supports it. Now we're going to bring another Tana who supports this understanding. And then we're going to bring a different Tana who has a different understanding. Tanya Rabbi Yossi Omer, Shitin mecholalin v'yordim ad tehom. Okay, these shitin, as we said, right, they are hollowed out, these drain pipes, and they go all the way down to the depths. Shenemal, how do we know this? A different verse. Ashira nali yididi, shirat dodi lekarmo. I'm going to sing you a song. It's the song of a beloved for someone who loves his vineyard. This is a famous parak in Yeshayahu. Okay, and in a minute, I'm going to show you a reference in one of the Zmirot that we say on Shabbat, but now you'll understand maybe a line that you never understood before. Kerem hayali didi bekeren ben shamen. My friend had a kerem, a vineyard, in this corner that was a very full shamen, like a fat, a good area. Vayazkeu, vayisakleu. Okay, vayazkeu, I forgot the translation of vayazkeu. One second. He put a fence around it. Okay, first he started with a fence. In other words, the first thing you have to do is protect the area before you do anything. So he protected the area, put a fence around. Vayisakleu, remember we saw this the other day, taking out the stones. We talked about it in Shemitah year, right? So you take the stones out of the ground to make the ground better. Then Vayita'eu sorek, he then planted his beautiful special vineyard. Okay, sorek is a very special vineyard. Vayivem migdal b'tocho, he built a tower in it. V'gam yekev chatzav bo, and then he made a yekev, right, a place for growing the grapes. So, now we're going to darshan what these things are. Vayita'eu sorek ze beit hamikdash. This is a reference to God. God basically put a fence around us, right? Prepared us, taking out the stones, all that. And Gita, you already got it, the reference to the Zemer. Okay, I'll say it in a minute. And then Vayita'eu sorek, meaning what did he plant in there? The Beit HaMikdash. Sorek is the most prized thing there is. So what's that? The temple. So when we say in Dror Yikra, Nita sorek betoch karmi, Nita sorek is plant right, it's this prized vineyard, but what it really means is plant the Beit HaMikdash b'toch karmi, right, in your vineyard. In other words, asking God to please rebuild the temple. So now you know what that line means. So that's the Beit HaMikdash. Vayivem migdal b'tocho, right, it's fun, we learn something, and then we see that this is the source for something we say that we never knew what it meant, or maybe you did know, but in case you didn't, now you know. Vayivem migdal b'tocho ze mizbeach. What's the migdal? What's the most important thing he built in the temple? The altar. And what's the gam yekev chatzav? But where did he dig this, what did he dig that's inside this altar? Elu Hashitim. And that's how we get to that God, right? Another reference from the prophets in this case to the fact that these Shittim were created by God. Tanya, now we're going to see a different Braita with a different approach. So far we saw the approach that these Shittim go all the way down to the depths, and that they were then, and the other right connection of that is that they were created by God already in the time of creation. Now we're going to see a different approach. Amar Rabbi Elazar bar Tzadok, Lul katan haya ben kevesh lemizbeach b'ma'aravo shel kevesh. There was this little area, like a little space between the ramp and the altar. If you remember, between the ramp and the ramp leads up to the altar, and there was a little space in between. This seems to be indicating not exactly in that space. Okay, I'll show you on the map. Okay, so here we have the altar, we have the ramp. There was a little space in between. You can actually see it if you look carefully, a little space. But here on the side, on our side, right near where the holes are, here are the holes. Right there, there's this little square. You see that? Okay, that square, it says here marble tablet. Okay, we're going to see now what it is, and I'm going to show you a picture from the picture book also, because again, it's very hard to visualize what they're talking about here. But there was a lul katan. Okay, you see this child? He's in a hole. That's the lul katan. We're now here. Okay, you can see this is the yesod. These two holes are not the holes that we're talking about. These are different two holes. These are the two holes at the base of the altar. Remember, there's a yesod around that goes up one amma and out one amma. And those are the two holes where they would pour the extra blood. Those are different from the two holes we're discussing, which are at the top of the altar. But the two holes at the top of the altar are above this. And there would be a drain pipe through there that we get to here. There's the little child that's in this little cubicle, right? This little kind of area, space that goes down. Now he's right here. Now what are we talking about here? Here's the floor of the temple. Here on the side, there's this square tile. You can't really see the whole thing, but it has a little hook on it. And this is like when you have on your floor something and you want to be able to pick it up. Like if there's usually it's sewage underneath, right? And you want to be able to pick it up. So they put a hook on it. So a ring on it. So that's what they have here. And it covered the floor. It was like a tile in the ground that you were able to pick up and remove. And underneath it was this hole that came drained from, right? It connected to the drain that came out of the shittim. So lul katana ben kevesh lemizbeach. So when it says ben kevesh lemizbeach, I just wanted to point out, it seems like it doesn't really mean in between where, because remember, the ramp doesn't go in the whole length of the altar, just most of it, but not the whole thing. So it must mean between the ramp, meaning off the altar, parallel, right next to the ramp. Okay, that's what it seems to mean here. And what would happen here? Once every 70 years, just about, right? It's not clear whether it's 70. Some people, so there's a different version of this that says 60 or 70 years, but once in a very long time. Pirchei Kuna, that's that little kid there, the young children of the Kohanim. Yordim Lisham, they would go down into the hole, probably children, because probably bigger people couldn't fit there. Umelaktim Misham Yain Karush, Shedome Igulei Dvela. They would take out wine that had hardened. And because what happened, the wine goes down there. Now, if the wine goes all the way to home, to the depths, there is no wine there. He obviously held that there was a floor there. And the lul, right, this opening, this area, or really the tablet that they put over it, right, they would this tile, and they would open it up. That was basically the bottom of the shittim. Okay, so these shittim went down until that point. It had a floor, and it was a marble floor. A marble floor, right, doesn't absorb all the wine. So now, to me, it seems 70 years is not going to be enough for all the wine libations that they did all this time. So I don't have a good answer for that. But every once in a while, they would have to go down and clean it out because there would be wine stuck there that because it sat there for so long, it hardened. And they would have to clean that out. And they were like igulei tvela. Remember, those are the fig cakes. They would press the figs in. There would be this hardened thing. So they would get there. And then they would take it out. That's what if you see in this picture, the child is holding something in his hand. That's the wine that's dried up. Okay. And then he's giving it to the other Kohanim and they're taking it out. And what are they going to do with it? They're going to burn it. Okay. Why is that? They burn it like all sanctified items that we have nothing to do with, right? We have to burn. As it says, this is a verse that talks about in Bamidbar when it talks about the sacrifices and the nisachim you bring with the daily sacrifice. It says in the Kodesh, okay, big Kodesh with sanctity, you're supposed to be hesech nesech, or the wine libations. Shechal, which is wine, even though it's not really wine, it's usually shechar is a term for beer, but it also has to do with something that intoxicates you. So this intoxicating drink, la Hashem, in a little while we're going to darshan why is it shechar instead of wine, but we're not up to that yet. So how do they learn from this? First, they say, kashem shenisucho b'kedusha, it says, b'kodesh hasech nesech, just like when you pour the libation, it's with sanctity. Kach srefato b'kedusha, it also has to be burned with sanctity. So the Gemara says, my mashma, how exactly do you get that from this pasuk? We're going to have a bunch of those today, where they bring something, they say, we learn it from a pasuk, and then the people say, how do you learn that from this pasuk? I don't get it. Right? This is a good example of if you're learning on your own, you're trying to figure it out, and you read this, and you stop before you move to the next line. It's like a good lesson when you're learning Gemara. Often, like let's say I was preparing yesterday, I read that, and I'm thinking, what's the connection, right? It doesn't exactly say you're supposed to burn it, b'kedusha in the pasuk. How do we get that? If you stop right there and you try to think, you're not going to get anywhere. If you look at the next verse, the next line, you realize, oh, the Gemara is going to ask the same question I did, which is they didn't really understand how to get it from the verse. And then they go on and explain. So sometimes you have to go farther, even if you don't understand. And then, if it didn't help you, then you go back and try to figure it out. But sometimes moving forward helps you figure it out. So my mashma, how do we get it from this verse? Amar Ravina, atya kodesh kodesh. It's a gzera shava of the word kodesh. K'tiv hacha. Remember, Gzera Shava, two words appear in two different places. We're going to learn from one to the other. Here it says, B'kodesh, you should pour the libation. Uktiv hatam, and it says by notar. Remember, if you leave the meat beyond the designated time, you're supposed to eat the sacrifice. It says, V'sarafta et hanotar ba'esh. You have to burn whatever's left in a fire. Lo ye'achel ki kodeshu. It can't be eaten because it's sanctified. What does that teach you? Anything with sanctity needs to be burned. So that's how we learn that it has to be burned. This is what Rabbi Elazar bar Tzadok said. Okay, so again, we have a basic debate. Were the shitin created by God? And then those drain pipes go to who knows where, and we never have wine left, really. We never have to clean it out because there is no set, right? And that's not an issue. Or did they go to is it a finite space and it was created by man? And then they need to be cleaned out every once in a while. And then we clean it out, we burn it. So now they're going to say, according to his approach, does the following Mishnah go? It says Tanya, but it should be Tnan. Nesachim b'tchila mo'alim bahem, yardu the shitin e mo'alim bahem. Okay, first, we need some background. What is mi'ilah? Mi'ilah is misuse of consecrated property. If you misuse consecrated property accidentally, you have to bring an asham mi'ilot, sacrifice. You have to return the value of what you used, and you have to add an extra chomesh, a fifth, which is really a quarter. So now we say these nisachim. In the beginning, before you pour them, then there's a law of mi'ilah. If someone were to use them, right? We took the water, let's say, we put it in that golden vessel that sanctified it, and then someone else decided to drink it. So that would be me'ilah, right? They didn't realize what it was. They drank it. That would be me'ilah. But your do the shitim, once it goes down those drain pipes, emo alim bahem. So the first reading is going to say, this clearly seems to be Lema Rabbi Elazar bar Tzadoki. This must be Rabbi Elazar bar Tzadok's approach. Why? Because Rabbanan ki nachtulu l'tahom. They already went all the way down to the depths. There is no retrieving this water. Once you pour it, it's nowhere's land at this point. So forget that there's no me'ilah. You wouldn't have to tell us there's no me'ilah. There is no one would ever benefit from them. So then they say, no, afilu tema Rabbanan b'de'iklat. Theoretically, okay, now there's two ways to understand this, or maybe more, but one way is to say maybe some of it collects somehow on the sides of the walls there, got stuck there, or maybe a more likely explanation is, although I don't know why you would do this, but if someone were to, let's say, put a bowl in the hole to catch the wine before it goes down, then there would be an issue of me'ilah then. So even according to the rabbis, it's true it goes down to the depths, but theoretically one could catch the water before it goes down. V'ikad amri, some people have an opposite version of this sugya, which is instead of suggesting maybe it's Rabbi Elazar bar Yaakov, they say no. Lema Rabbanan v'lo Rabbi Elazar bar Tzadok. Why? The first assumption is it must be the rabbi's opinion, this Mishnah. Why? Ti'i Rabbi Elazar akati b'kedushatayu kaime. What did he say? You have to burn it even once once it dries up at the bottom. If that's the case, then if it's still in its sanctity, then it must still have laws of me'ilah. If we said you have to burn it, then it must be, it's still, if I would use it, let's say I took out that wine that had dried up and I used it for whatever. I don't know what I could use it for, but let's say I used it for something. It would have me'ilah. So it sounds like this can't be Rabbi Elazar because it said there is no me'ilah at that point. So now they said, no, you could say it has sanctity and yet the laws of me'ilah don't apply. Why is that? We already learned this, you remember, which is once a mitzvah is completed, you've done what is supposed to be done with that mitzvah, the laws of me'ilah don't apply anymore. So since this wine was already poured and you already did with it what you were supposed to, therefore there's no more laws of me'ilah. And then you could say it matches Rabbi Elazar, and therefore we've tried to prove everything and really prove nothing in the end, because this Mishnah could be Rabbi Elazar bar Tzadok and it could be Rabbanit. Amarish Lakish. Okay, now we get back to why I showed you the pictures, and you'll see why. This is, again, a little hard to visualize what's going on here. I'll put that out there in the beginning. Amarish Lakish. Bizman sheminaschim yayin al gabei mizbeach, when they would pour the wine libations. Notice here, by the way, we moved from the water libations and we're focusing more on the wine libations. Because first of all, those were the things that went on every day, right? We kind of got into this because we were talking about the two holes and the two libations that are done. In any case, when they did the wine libations that go with the sacrifices, pokikinet hashitim, those drain pipes, those holes at the top of the altar, they stop them up. Okay, this is why I want to show you the pictures, because what's the issue here? L'kayem Hashem ne'emar, and here's a different drasha of that pasuk we saw before, ba'kodesh hasech nesech shechar la'Hashem. Because of that verse, because it says, in sanctity we pour the libation, the shechal for God. Okay, that didn't prove anything. That didn't tell me put a stopper in the hole. So my mashma, again, they're going to say, how do we get that from the verse? Amarav Papa, shechal. Why did it use shechal instead of wine? Whenever it talks about the libations, it talks about wine libations. So why all of a sudden are we saying shechal? So they say, shechal, lashon shtiya. It's something one drinks. Talks about drinking. Some people actually have simcha instead of shtiya, which makes sense because shtiya is nothing so unique. Could be simcha, it has this association with happiness. Lashon svi'ah has this idea of being satiated with when you drink, and lashon shechurut, and drunkenness. So what's the connection? So it seems that the connection was really with this word svi'ut, or the svi'ah, which is what? We want to show, now when you eat and you're full, right, your belly sticks out and you feel, oh, I'm so full. When you pour this water down the drain pipe, and it disappears immediately, that doesn't look like there's any satiation, right? You don't see a stomach filling up and saying, oh, I'm full right now. So what would they do? They plug the hole. The wine is now going to pour over. Okay, now this is where I a little bit lose exactly what's happening here, because what's going to happen is, now this is why I showed you the cups have stands. They're on stands. So that means you're going to watch the wine go from the hole, because I imagine the hole was right underneath. Right, the hole of the cup was flush with the hole of the in the altar, but no, it was above. So it would go through the hole, it would drop down from the hole. Everyone would see it drop down into the other hole, but it wouldn't go in the hole. It would start overflowing on the altar. So you would see this overflowing wine on the altar, and that would give you this feeling of satiation. What I don't understand from there is how exactly did it then go down into the drain pipe and not fall over the sides of the altar? That I haven't really figured out. So I don't have any good answers. If someone can explain it, I'm happy to hear. But it seems it must have overflowed a little. Maybe it was, the floor was a little bit angled, and then it, kind of collected and then went down when I don't know how long they waited also till they opened up the stopper. So in any case, we want people to kind of see the wine overflowing, to have this idea of svi'ah, of satiation. So now, Amarav Papa, the other option is maybe they were pokikin a little bit lower down into the hole, and it went into the hole and kind of overflowed a little bit and then went back in. Anyway, it's again, not so clear. Amarav Papa, right? I see Shoshana, you're right, maybe it was a miracle. That's also possible. Maybe it was this miraculous thing. I'm not sure. I don't think it's related to the Kiddush Havdalah overflowing cup of wine, but maybe this idea of Svi'ah and all that, maybe it's somewhat connected. Amarav Papa, Shmamina, Ki Sava Inish Hamra, Migrone Sava. We can infer from here that when someone gets satiated with wine, it's the satiation is in his throat. It's not down in the stomach, it's up at the top. Okay, you can get that from this idea here. Amarava, and Rava also says, also, Rava says, we learn from here that a Talmid Chacham who doesn't have a lot of wine, maybe because they often were poor, they don't have a lot of access to wine, he should take big gulps because, right, people like to do this also, right? They have the wine in their mouth and they leave it there a little while, right, and then swallow it. The enjoyment of wine is in the throat and the mouth, not necessarily in the stomach, right? When you eat your food, you feel the satiation in your stomach. Here, you feel the satiation, right, is almost a more immediate in the mouth and the throat. And therefore, Rava, Kasa de Birchata, Igma Gamue. He would, when he would have a koshel bracha, when he would make a bracha like on benching, he would make it on a cup of wine or something like that, he would drink it all in one big, he would take big sips so that he would have more enjoyment of it. Okay. Now we're going to go back to the beginning. We had this drasha. We started with, the first thing we did today was about the Shitimi Me Breshit Nivru'u, and they proved it from this verse in Shiur Shirim, Chamukei Rachayach Kamocha Le'imase Yedei Oman. Now that's actually the second part of a pasuk, and we're now going to darshan the first part of that verse. Before we do that, I actually forgot that I wanted to get back to something about yesterday. I wanted to start with it. We started yesterday with Pazar Kashav, and there was some questions asked in the chat, in the Zoom chat, or the Zoom WhatsApp group, about the shloshim, about the holiday canceling the shloshim. So I wanted to explain it so that it's very clear, because I didn't explain it yesterday properly. I said that it cancels shloshim, Shmini Atzeret. It doesn't cancel shloshim. I was wrong about that. The way it works, okay, I'll give you an example so it's very clear. If someone were to die before Sukkot, okay, this is only before, because if it happens on the holiday, Shiva only starts after and nothing is cut short. But if someone dies before Sukkot, then the Shiva gets canceled when the holiday starts, and it's as if 7 days pass. So when you're counting for the shloshim, doesn't matter if it was 1 day, if it was an hour, whatever it was, we assume for shloshim 7 days have passed because you've kind of concluded your shiva. Then each day of the holiday counts as a day, so you have another 7 days of Sukkot. But then Shmini Atzeret itself, since it's a holiday in and of itself, works like Shavuot works, which is that 1 day of holiday counts as 7 days of a holiday for counting shloshim. So you basically are finished with 21 days of shloshim. That's how it works. Okay, so I'm sorry that I didn't explain that well yesterday. I hope that's clear now. So it doesn't cancel your shloshim, it just adds, right? So Shmini Atzeret would be like Shavuot, and that a 1 day holiday basically counts as 7 full days of shloshim. Okay, so you still have a few more days, but you're not starting from the, it's not like as if you didn't have shloshim, or you don't count it's interesting because the holiday of 7 days counts as 7 days of shloshim, but that 1 day, because it's a 1 day holiday, counts as 7 days of shloshim. Okay, back to our pasuk from Shiur Shirim. So now again, the pasuk reads, Ma yafu pa'amayach b'na'alim, how beautiful are your steps in your shoes. Many people actually say they mean sandals. Bat nidiv, the daughter of princes. Chamukei Yerechayach, the hidden parts of your thighs are kimo chalaim asei yedei oman. They're like beautiful things that are crafted by a craftsman. Okay, so we explained the end part of that verse to be talking about the shitim. Now we're going to darshan this pasuk differently. We're certainly the beginning part, and then we'll get to also the end part. Darash Rav. Rava explains, "My dechtiv ma yafu pa'amayach b'na'alim bat nidiv." What does this mean? So, how beautiful are your steps in your sandals, you daughter of princes? Ma yafu pa'amotehen shel Yisrael b'sha'a she'olim laregel. How beautiful are the steps of the Jews instead of pa'amotayach b'na'alim? It's like na'alim are like regalim, right? Regalim are the 3 holidays, but they're also called the legs, right? There's this connection of shoes, legs. So they say when you set foot on aliyah regel, right? All the Jews that come on Aliyah L'Regel, how beautiful are their footsteps. Bat Nediv, why are they called Bat Nediv? Bito shel Avraham Avinu, they're like the daughters of Avraham Avinu. Shenikra Nediv, Avraham was called Nediv. Shene'emal, Nidivei Amim Ne'esafu Am Elohei Avraham. Here's a different verse that's going to show the connection of Avraham to the word Nediv. Okay, Nidivei Amim are the princes of the people are gathered, the nation of the God of Abraham. So they ask, what do you mean, Elohei Avraham, the Lo Elohei Yitzchak Yaakov? What? We're a nation. We're the people of Avraham, Yitzchak, and Yaakov. We're not just the nation of Avraham. Why does it specifically use Avraham only? Ela Elohei Avraham shehayat tchila legerim. He was the first of the converts. In other words, he was the first one who came to recognize God and then also got all these people to follow him. He became this big prince. So when we talk about the nation of princes, we're going to say, oh, this is the people of Avram who started this whole thing. And, everybody kind of followed him. So now the Maharshan, together with the Iyun Yaakov, have a very interesting explanation here. What's the connection between Avraham and Aliyah L'Regel and going up on the holidays? And they connect it to Avraham and the Akedah. The Maharsha says Avraham was the first one, so to speak, who went on Aliyah L'Regel. He went to Haram, right, the Har Asher Yira'eh, which, right, according to tradition, is where the temple was built. And so he was the first one who basically did that. And the Iyun Yaakov adds that it showed his going to the Akedah was this Mesirut Nefesh, right? He basically said, I'm giving my life or my son's life to God. I'll do whatever God wants. And he left his family behind, right? He was even willing to sacrifice his family. And he says that's similar to Aliyah L'Regel, where people, in order to worship God, sacrifice. And, I know people have asked, like, what kind of Sukkot did they have going on Aliyah L'Regel? And what he says is, right, it's a big sacrifice to leave your family behind and go on this pilgrimage to God and worship God throughout the holiday. That's a big sacrifice. And it's almost like the same sacrifice that Abraham made at the Akedah was the sacrifice that they made by going on Aliyah L'Regel, leaving their families behind, leaving their jobs behind, and just kind of leaving everything and going, right? Forget about just the 7 days of the holiday or 8 days, but it was also the preparation, right? It took them time to get there and all that. So I see, Geeta, you're comparing it to Uman, and I'm not going to go there. But yes, so it's this big sacrifice. So now, which I just thought the connection to the Akedah was very interesting, even though the Akedah isn't mentioned here. That's not what they're saying, but maybe there's a connection there. Tana debe Rav Anan. So now Rav Anan is going to bring another braita about a different way of darshaning the second part of the verse, which it was talking about the shitim, the thighs. Instead, we're going to darshan it a different way. My dechtiv chamukei yerechayich. Lama nimshalu divrei Torah ki yarech. They're assuming that the verse is a reference to Torah. Why is Torah like a thigh? Lomar lecha ma yarech beseter, just like your thighs are covered up. Af divrei Torah beseter. Your Torah learning should be covered up. V'hainu damar Rabbi Elazar, and this is what actually, let's stop for a minute. What does it mean your Torah learning should be beseter? It means, right, okay, this is classic for Daf Yomi. You're going out somewhere and you take your Gemara with you and you start learning, right? So it's not like you can't learn in public, but you shouldn't make a spectacle of yourself and say, oh, I want everyone to know I'm learning. Let's put this out there. That's not what you should use Torah for. You shouldn't use Torah to show off, to brag, and look what I do, and look how great I am. It's not to say you shouldn't learn Torah outside, but you should try to be more private about your learning and not use it as a way to try to attract respect to yourself or things like that. The Torah learning should be for yourself, and it should be kept somewhat private. And now Rabbi Elazar, and this is going to start us on a slew of drashot of Rabbi Elazar, which is going to take us to the end of the daf, which is Rabbi Elazar made the following statement, Hainu da'amar Rabbi Elazar. So he said something in the same lines. My dichtiv, very famous pasuk from Micha, Higid lecha adam ma tov u'ma Hashem doresh mincha. I'm going to tell you what is good and what God wants from you, right? This is what we always want to know. What does God want from us? This is what God wants, says Micha. Ki'im asot mishpat, all he wants you to do, right? Ki'im is like, this is all you really need to do. Do right justice. Ahavat chesed, love chesed, kindness. Vatznei alechet im Elohecha, and walk with God with tzniut. Now, tzniut, we often think of tzniut as dress. They're not talking about dress. They're not talking about dress, sanua. They're saying act humble. Like, don't try to brag about things, etc. Right? Do things quietly in your own quiet way. So let's go through these things. Asat mishpat zehadin. This is right justice. This is law. Keep the laws, do within the law. Ahavat and try to maybe, as a judge, like make sure there's justice served. Avat chesed zog milut chasadim. This is doing good things for other people. This, you're going to be surprised a little bit by this one. What is Hatzneah Lechet? Again, this doesn't have to do with clothes. It doesn't even seem to have to do with Hatzneah Lechet, although we'll have to explain how. This is taking out the dead, and bringing the kala to the chuppah. It sounds like making the kala happy, right? L'samech hatan and kala. Okay, what's strange about this? So what's strange about this is that both those things, let's say, taking out a dead body is something you do in public. Right? We're talking about Hatzneah Lechet, do things quietly. Those are things you do in public. And Achnasat Kala is also something you do in public. Usually weddings are big, and right, that's something that's very public. So now the Gemara says, Halo dvarim kal v'chomer. We can make a kal v'chomer from this. Uma dvarim shedarkan asotam b'farhesia, things that normally are done in public, amra Torah Hatzneah Lechet. Specifically, it chose things that are normally done in public. Even things done in public, there's a way to do them b'tzniut. Very interesting lesson, right? You can do things that are public and yet do them in a more humility, with humility, and not in a braggy, show-offy way. Like I said, you could learn Daf Yomi. You're sitting on the airplane and you take out your Gemara. You're not doing it to show off, right? So likewise, they're going to say, therefore, all the more so, all the more so, things that are meant to be private should be done in a private, humble manner. Okay, some people say, by the way, is maybe giving money for this, and that also should be done secretly and not publicly. To give money for a funeral, give money for a kala who needs the money, and you should do that. But don't brag about it, don't show off about it. Do it quietly. So here, as I said, we're now going to get on a whole slew of statements that Rabbi Elazar says about similar things. Gadol ha'oset tzedakah yoter mikol korbanot. Giving tzedakah is better than all sacrifices. Shneimar asot tzedakah u'mishpat nivchar la'Hashem mizebach. These are all the messages that the Nevi'im are trying to get across. The people living in a culture about sacrifices, and they think sacrifices are the end all be all, and we can give our sacrifices but do whatever the heck we want. And they're saying, no. I don't want your sacrifices. I'd much rather have you do tzedakah u'mishpat, right? Give tzedakah to people, righteousness, justice, etc. V'amar Rabbi Elazar, another statement. Well, after he said tzedakah is so important, now he says, so tzedakah is more important than sacrifices. But even more important than that is milut chasadim. Why? Shneimar, here's a very interesting pasuk, zir'u lachem l'tzedakah v'kitzru l'pi chesed. Okay, you should plant with tzedakah, and you should reap, harvest your stuff with chesed. So what's the difference between zri'ah and ktsira? Im adam zoreah, when you plant, safek ochel, safek ein ochel, you have no idea what's going to happen. You don't know if it'll actually do anything or not. If anything will grow. But adam kotzel, vaday ochel, when you harvest, you have food in front of you. You know you're going to eat. So how is that similar to tzedakah? So tzedakah, here's a bunch of interesting explanations. Number one, you give to a poor person, you don't even necessarily know if they're poor or not. How do you know? That's always a big question. So it's not to say don't give tzedakah, but doing chesed is better because you know for sure this person needs whatever it is you're doing for them, and therefore you're helping them. Now, one could say maybe they don't really need your chesed, so maybe that's not the best explanation. Some people say you give a poor person money. First of all, if you give it through some sort of nonprofit, you don't know, is the money actually going to get to that person or not? You never really know, right? It's always important to check out the nonprofit to know, is the money really going there? Is it going to something else? Sometimes people funnel money to other, yeshivas or other organizations. This has happened before and known to be a problem. Or if you give them person directly, maybe they'll, use it for drug money. Maybe they'll, I don't know. Maybe they won't use the money at all. They use it for the wrong purpose. Maybe they'll lose the money. It's not a sure thing what's going to be. Whereas if you do a chesed for someone, you bring someone to a chemotherapy appointment, you know that you've done something that they can't do on their own, and you've finished what you started out to do. So that's a very beautiful message. So now in 3 ways, miluch chasadim is more important than tzedakah. Tzedakah b'mamono, gemilut chasadim ben begufo ben b'mamono. Tzedakah you can only do with money, but gemilut chesed you could do with your body. You could do with money also, but you could do with your body as well. This is a bit of a reference to one of the answers I said before, which is maybe they're rich. So here the point is milut chesed can be done for anybody. Anybody could use chesed. Even wealthy people, need chesedim. So that's another difference. It's a very beautiful one that you can do chesed even for someone who's dead. Whereas like let's say on Meit Mitzvah or anything, right? You do the tahara for the dead body. That's a chesed you're doing for someone who's dead, whereas you can't give tzedakah to someone who's not alive anymore. Amar Rabbi Elazar, kol oset tzedakah mishpat, another statement. If you do tzedakah mishpat, ki'ilu milei kol haaretz kolo chesed. It's as if you fill the whole world with chesed. Shenemar, ohet tzedakah mishpat, chesed Hashem ala haaretz. One who loves righteousness and justice will basically fill the world with chesed. So you're causing chesed to happen in the world. Shema tomal kol abalik kofetz kofetz. Maybe you'll say anyone who wants to do chesed, opportunities will present themselves, because sometimes you want to do chesed and you can't. This reminds me of Boaz when he says to Ruth, "Thank you for giving me chesed, like you allowed me to do chesed for you." Sometimes we don't have opportunities to do chesed. Now you might say, well, go find. There's plenty of opportunities out there. There's no shortage of a need, but theoretically, maybe one could say maybe it's hard to find, or an opportunity might not present itself. So maybe you think that God will help you. No, Talmud lomar ma yakar chesed Elohim. No, it's yakar. Yakar is something expensive that you can't always access. No, it's not so easy to find. Okay, and God's not going to help you with this. What he also doesn't help the Yirei Shamayim, those God-fearing people. Well, those he does. Talmud lomar b'chesed Hashem me'olam v'yad olam al yire'av. God's chesed is always everywhere for those who fear God. So if you fear God, opportunities for chesed will present themselves. If you don't, you'll have to find them yourself. Okay, as I said, we're in a slew of statements of Rabbi Elazar. This is a side. We're getting off on an aside because it's going to darshan the same verse that we darshaned a second ago in a different way. Another beautiful idea. If you see a person who exudes grace, right? Sometimes you meet someone and you just say, wow, that's an unbelievable person. You could just tell. You can know. Now, this is something nobody really knows what's inside, and there's someone, a God-fearing person. But if you see someone with grace, you know that they're a God-fearing person. How do we know this? From this verse, it says the chesed of God, which here they understand is the grace of God, is on those who fear him. V'amar Rabbi Elazar, last rasha for today, we'll have two versions of it. A very famous pasuk from Eshechayil, which is in Mishle, Proverbs. Pia potcha b'chokhmah b'torat chesed al leshona. Her mouth opens with intelligent things, and Torat chesed is on her mouth, on her tongue. So, yesh Torah shel chesed, yesh Torah she'ena shel chesed. First of all, it's interesting. There's a woman in Torah, and they're darshaning this for Limud Torah. So that's just it just hit me right now. What is a Torah of chesed? What does that mean? What, this Torah that's not chesed? You can learn Torah and it's not chesed. What does that mean? So the first explanation is Ela Torah lishma zoi Torah shel chesed. Shelo lishma zoi Torah she'ena shel chesed. There's learning for the right reasons and learning not for the right reasons. Right? You're learning because you want to get close to God. That's Torah shel chesed. Torah she'ena shel chesed is you're learning because you want people to think you're smart. You want to make an impression. You want to, as this goes back to the sugya we saw earlier. But now they have another one. Ika da'amre Torah lelamda. If you learn, what's chesed? Chesed is giving. What kind of learning could be a learning of chesed? You learn in order to teach. So if Torah lelamda, if you're learning in order to teach, Zoe Torah shel chesed. Shelo lelamda, if you're learning it not to teach, Zoe Torah she'ena shel chesed. I want to leave you with this thought of how beautiful this stuff ends. This doesn't necessarily mean you're going to go into teaching. This doesn't say you have to go into and teach, but it means if you learn something and you teach it to somebody else, it doesn't have to be that you're a teacher. But if you go and you learn something interesting and you teach it to somebody else, that's a real learning, that you take this learning and you want to share it with other people. So that's this beautiful idea that we're going to end with about this idea of Torah shel chesed, of giving it to others and obviously doing it l'shma for the right reasons, and also passing on your Torah to other people and sharing it. That's a real learning of Torah. That will end for today. Have a great day, everyone.